In the last video, we established two important facts. First off, we're going to initialize our different state values inside of square screen. And because color counter needs to change those values, we're going to make sure that we pass down a callback function from square screen down to color counter that will allow them to modify those state values. So let's open up our square screen component and first initialize those different state values. So back inside of my code editor, I'm inside of my square screen file. To get started, I'm going to first import that useState hook from the React library at the very top. Remember, we refer to this function as a hook because it allows us to add in some new functionality to a function-based component. Then at the very top, I'm going to initialize three different state values. So the first one will be some value for the amount of red that we want our square to have. We'll also get our setRed setter. That will be useState, and we're going to give it an initial value of 0. We'll then repeat that same process twice again for green and blue. So we'll do green for setGreen, and blue with setBlue. So now we've got three different state values. We have three different setters, one for each, and each of those values is initialized to a value of 0. So now we need to somehow make sure that our color counter components have the ability to somehow change these different state values. As I just mentioned back in this slide right here, we're going to pass a callback function from the parent down to the child. And in that callback function, we're going to allow these children to modify the value of red, green, or blue. Okay, so I'm going to find color counter right here. I'm going to add in two callback functions to each of these. I'm adding two because each one needs to either increment or decrement the current state value. So for color counter, the first one right here, I'm going to make up a new prop name. I'm going to call it, how about onIncrease? So if a child component ever calls this function right here, we want to increase red by 1. So I'll do onIncrease inside of here. I'll call setRed, red plus 1, like so. Then I'll do the same thing for handling a decrease as well. So I'll add in onDecrease. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here by adding in some new lines just so I can very easily see these. And now for onDecrease, anytime we run this function, we want to decrease the value of red by 1. So I will call setRed, red minus 1, like so. All right, so we've only put the first one together, but let's really quickly add in a console log for red inside of here. Console log of red. Then we're going to flip over to our color counter component. We're going to wire up these callback functions to the buttons inside there, and we'll be able to test out our code for just the color red for right now. So I'm going to save this. I'll then change over to color counter. Here's my color counter component. I'm going to find my props object right here. Remember, we just added in two new props. One was called onIncrease and the other is onDecrease. So we can pull those off of our props object right here, just like we did with color. So we'll get onIncrease and onDecrease. Now we can wire up these two callback functions to both of the button elements we have inside of here. So for both these button elements, I'll add on the onPress prop. Inside there, I'll assign a function. And then if a user clicks on the button that says increase color, I'm going to call the onIncrease callback. Same thing for the second one as well. Here's onPress. I'll add in an arrow function. If this button is ever pressed, I will call onDecrease. So think about what's really going on here. We are passing down this callback. The way you can really think about this callback, it's almost as though, rather than passing down this callback, what's really going on is we're really passing down that expression right there. We're passing down the ability to call setRed with red plus 1 and setRed with red minus 1. So we can almost imagine that we're kind of like copy-pasting that little segment of code right there and throwing it directly into this button callback, or the onPress handler. Like right there, we can almost imagine that is what is occurring. So our child component is now more or less directly calling setRed. But it's being done through this kind of layer of abstraction through the onIncrease and onDecrease callbacks. Okay, so now that we've added this in, let's save both these files and we'll do a quick test. So I'll open up my Square demo. I'm going to click on increase red once or twice, and then decrease red once or twice as well. I'll then flip back over to my terminal, and we should see the appropriate console logs. So here we go. We've got an initial value for red of 0. We then increased it to 1, and then 2, and then I decreased it a couple times all the way down to -1. Now, of course, we probably don't want to decrease our color values beneath 0 because that's not a valid color, but we won't worry about that just yet. We'll solve that problem in a moment. All right, so it definitely looks like this is working. We've now got a good example of a state variable being created in a parent component. We pass down a callback function down to a child, and this callback allows the child to update the value of that state variable. Remember, anytime we call this setter right here, or any setter, it's going to cause our entire component and all of its children to automatically re-render as well. So if we had this red property right here hooked up to some actual style inside of this component, well, chances are everything would work as we expected. Okay, so I'm going to clean up that console log red. Let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next video, we're going to hook up our callbacks for green and blue as well. And then we'll be able to apply all these different colors to an actual view element and see that element change its color. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a minute.